My name is Lindsay Stewart, and I'm 32 years old. Last weekend at a family gathering, a single sentence I murmured to my sister flipped the entire night on its head. Within moments, murmurs spread, expressions shifted, and I realized just how fast trust can collapse when money is involved. By the night's end, I couldn't decide what was louder, the music or the pounding of my own heartbeat. Before I explain what unfolded and why my phone wouldn't stop buzzing the following morning, I want to know the time where you are and which city you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And then someone took a step I'll never forget, one that would forever alter the way I viewed my own family. Before that pivotal weekend, my life in Albuquerque was as steady as the New Mexico sunsets. Lovely from a distance, but blistering up close. I worked as an elementary school teacher in a public school, spending my days corralling second graders through math problems and playground chaos. My paycheck barely managed to cover rent for a one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood by the Rio Grande, where I brewed cheap coffee each morning and checked my banking app for overdraft warnings. I drove a 12-year-old Toyota Corolla to work, praying it wouldn't quit again after the last repair bill drained my savings. Family only added layers of complication. My parents, James and Susan Stewart, split when I was 12, turning our house into a battlefield of custody disputes and resentment. James, a civil engineer with a secure income, remarried Pamela Hart, a marketing consultant who adored pricey wine and weekend escapes, but never truly welcomed me as her own. Susan, who ran a small downtown boutique, found steadiness with Roger Bennett, a real estate agent who treated his money like a guarded vault. My older brother, Thomas, 36, pretended success with flashy startup pitches, yet he constantly asked for loans that turned into gifts. My younger sister, Danielle, 28, was the golden child, top of her class, married to Mark Taylor, a surgeon in a gated neighborhood with kids and a life that sparkled on social media. The aunts added their own flavor. Aunt Diane Moore, Susan's younger sister, was the sincere one, a retired librarian living on a fixed income in a modest condo lined with secondhand books and herbal teas. She battled heart issues but always found time for letters or calls, never requesting a thing. On the other side stood Aunt Karen Wright, James's older sister, who married into wealth and reminded us constantly, criticizing my career choices at family gatherings. Her daughter, Emily, my cousin, acted warm during visits, gossiping over coffee. But I later learned she funneled every detail back to Aunt Karen like a loyal spy. The extended ties were just as messy. I had given Thomas $3,000 last year for what he swore was a business crisis, only to discover it paid for a ski trip he bragged about online. Danielle borrowed $1,500 for her baby's nursery, promising repayment after her promotion. 5 months passed. Silence. James requested $2,000 for storm damage repairs, and I sent it from my credit card, then spotted pictures of him and Pamela vacationing on a Caribbean cruise. Susan asked for $500 to cover a boutique shortfall, claiming she'd return it soon, but instead Roger bought new golf equipment. These weren't one-off situations. They built a pattern that left me hardened and constantly bracing for the next ask. My best friend, Christina Long, a nurse I'd met in college, was the one steady presence. Over wine at her apartment, she'd remind me, "Lindsay, you can't keep being their ATM." She made me see I wasn't crazy for feeling drained. At school, my coworker Brian Kelly had a quiet crush, bringing me lunch or offering to cover recess duty, but I kept things platonic. He was sweet, but I wasn't looking for more complications. My little indulgence was buying lottery tickets every Friday at John Adams's corner store near school. John, the owner in his 60s, recognized my routine and always chatted about weather or neighborhood news. My family mocked it. Susan called it foolishness. Thomas joked I should just hand the money to him. James gave me statistical lectures. Still, I had dreams. Visiting the Grand Canyon without worrying about expenses, clearing student loans that clung like shadows, maybe earning a certification to teach upper grades. But at 32, with lingering credit debt from family loans and a monthly budget stretched razor thin, those dreams felt like fading mirages. I compared prices at grocery aisles, skipped outings to save gas, and perfected the art of smiling through stress, wondering if I'd ever break free. Little did I know, a quick stop at John's store on my birthday would shatter that routine in ways I couldn't predict. That birthday Friday began like any other rough day at school. A student had a meltdown during reading hour. Parents filled my inbox with grading complaints. I spent lunch buried in papers instead of food. Brian Kelly noticed my tension and said, "Lindsay, you look like you need a break. Want to grab coffee after?" I appreciated the offer but waved it off, too drained to deal with his obvious feelings. When the final bell rang, I drove straight to John Adams' corner store, keeping with my ritual. John greeted me with his usual nod and asked, "Tough week, the usual tickets?" I nodded, handing over $10. But on impulse, I asked for one extra and picked the numbers myself instead of using Quick Pick. John glanced at the digits I chose, my birth month and day, Susan's birthday, James's, Aunt Diane's, and Christina's, and smiled strangely, saying, "Those look familiar. You know, your grandma used similar ones back in the day. She used to tell stories about family inheritances that disappeared in the shuffle." I laughed, assuming it was just chatter, but his remark lingered as I drove home. That evening, I treated myself to takeout from a nearby Mexican place and opened a bottle of wine Christina had given me. The lottery drawing aired at 8 p.m., but I barely watched at first. Scrolling through family photos on my phone, Danielle's perfect kids, Thomas's staged success posts, Aunt Karen's luxury getaway pics. Then the numbers popped up. The first matched my birth date, then Susan's, James's, Aunt Diane's, and Christina's. My heart leapt as the final number fell into place. I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips, and checked the ticket against the screen 3 times, hands trembling so much I dropped my phone. This couldn't be real. The lottery website confirmed it. I was the sole winner of $50 million. After taxes, it'd be about $30 million, a figure that made my head spin for someone who'd celebrated a $20 win last year like it was Christmas. Sleep avoided me that night. Instead, I paced the apartment, hunting online for stories about lottery winners. What I found terrified me. Families torn apart by greed, relatives resurfacing with sob stories, winners ruined and bankrupt within a few years. One piece called it the quickest path to losing everything you cherish. As dawn crept over the Sandia Mountains, I made a decision. I'd claim the prize, but tell no one. Not Susan, not James, not even Christina. I needed time to plan safeguards before anyone could turn me into their personal ATM. The notion of testing their loyalty took root then, but first I had to secure the money without leaving a trail. The next morning, after realizing the win, I phoned in sick to school for the first time in months, blaming a migraine that wasn't entirely false. My head throbbed from the overnight upheaval. I booked a consultation with David Cole, a financial attorney who specialized in windfalls and estate planning, his office in a modern downtown Albuquerque tower. Sitting in the waiting room, clutching my purse with the ticket inside, dressed in my usual clothes, I felt like an imposter among sharply dressed clients. David greeted me warmly, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and keen eyes, and asked, "What can I do for you today, Lindsay?" I inhaled and slid the ticket across his desk, outlining the situation without initially naming the sum. His pupils widened slightly as he confirmed it. Then he leaned back and nodded in that professional way. "Congratulations, but I see why you're here quietly. In New Mexico, winners can claim through a trust to keep identities private." Over the next hour, David explained the steps. Set up a blind trust to anonymize the claim, handle federal and state taxes that would pair it to about $30 million, and craft a diversified investment plan across stocks, bonds, and property to protect growth. He warned, "The biggest trap is telling family too soon. They'll view you as a resource, not a person. I've seen relationships evaporate overnight." I nodded, relieved my instincts were validated, and we went over immediate moves, wiring funds to secure accounts and avoiding sudden lifestyle changes that might raise eyebrows. Leaving his office with a folder of paperwork, I felt an odd mix of power and loneliness. The money was mine, but celebration felt impossible. Back home, I kept up appearances, driving the old Corolla to the grocery store, bitching about bills and texts to Christina to sustain the act. That evening, I met Christina for dinner at a casual spot near Old Town. After small talk, I revealed a partial truth about the win and my idea to test the family. "I'm thinking of staging something to see who'd actually help if I needed it," I said, watching her response. Christina arched a brow, worried. "Lindsay, that sounds manipulative. Why not just be honest?" I explained the history of one-way favors, how I'd always been the lender and doubted anyone would reciprocate. She sighed but understood, saying, "If you're dead set, let's make it convincing." We spent the next hour rehearsing. I'd start with a phony $1 million ticket at the upcoming family party to measure greed, then follow up by pretending to need $4,000 for medical bills and rent after the loss. Christina helped sharpen the cover story, mention a sudden audit at school for plausibility. Even though I'm a teacher, I sketched notes predicting reactions. Thomas would promise the world, then vanish. Danielle would cite kid expenses. James would lecture about responsibility, but might slip in something about Grandma's missing inheritance. Susan would deflect. Aunt Karen would scold. Emily would act helpful, then report back to Pamela. Roger would flat out refuse. As we parted, the party loomed like an approaching storm, my nerves humming with anticipation for what it might expose. With the plan locked and the fake ticket printed to look authentic, I spent the days before the family gathering fine-tuning details. The reunion was at Aunt Karen's roomy house in Albuquerque's outer suburbs, a place with a big backyard ideal for barbecues and lawn games, though it always felt more like a stage for showing off than a true get-together. I arrived early to help prepare, carrying a dish of homemade enchiladas, hiding my nerves behind a practiced smile as guests trickled in. The air filled with the crackle of burgers on the grill and children running wild. Danielle's little ones chasing butterflies while Thomas cornered Roger with yet another investment pitch. Pamela and Roger made their entrance next. Pamela in a loud sundress, tossing a jab at my casual outfit as if it were a sin, while Roger complained about the traffic from their polished neighborhood. "Lindsay, you really ought to upgrade that car of yours," Pamela teased, her laugh sharp but humorless. I swallowed my reply and smiled instead. Soon after, Dad and Susan arrived together for the kids' sake. Dad shook Roger's hand stiffly while Mom gave me a quick hug, asking about work in that shallow, obligatory way. Aunt Karen bustled around barking orders, her tone cutting as she critiqued the food arrangement. Emily lingered nearby, smiling sweetly and offering to help with plates, but I caught her peeking at my phone more than once. The gathering grew as Mark and Danielle strolled in with their brood. Mark clapped Thomas on the back like old friends. Then Brandon Chen showed up unexpectedly. He'd toured my apartment earlier that week as a potential buyer, and Christina had casually suggested inviting him, though I didn't think he'd actually come. Brandon, a 32-year-old real estate flipper with an easy charm, struck up a conversation with Emily about housing prices, and she leaned in, laughing at every joke, while Mark threw jealous stares from across the yard. Roger even joined the banter, ribbing Mark about competition, stoking his ego-driven temper. As the sun sank lower, I pulled Danielle aside near the picnic table, away from the chatter. "Hey sis, I have to tell you something huge. I just won a $1 million ticket," I whispered, slipping her the fake slip. Her eyes flared like fireworks as she snatched it, muttering, "No way. Let me look closer." Before I could react, she tucked it into her pocket and disappeared into the house, mumbling something about the bathroom. I lingered, forcing small talk, though my stomach churned as minutes dragged on. Emily approached, feigning concern. "You okay? You look distracted." I brushed it off, but later I'd learned she texted Aunt Karen and Pamela right away, spilling everything she'd overheard. By the time the party wrapped up, goodbyes were coded in awkward tension. I feigned anxiety about the lost ticket, studying reactions. Dad gave a stiff pat on my shoulder. "If it's gone, consider it a lesson in caution." Mom suggested I recheck my purse. Pamela smirked. "Sounds careless." Roger chuckled. "Better luck next time." Brandon pulled me aside quietly, saying, "Hey, when I toured your place, I noticed old family papers in the attic, stuff about debts tied to your dad. Thought you should know." His words struck hard, confirming suspicions about the missing inheritance, but I thanked him softly as he left. Driving home, my phone buzzed. Mark's voice boomed, that fake hearty laugh barely masking greed. "Lindsay, Danielle told me about your big win. If you don't share it, say half for the family, I'll just toss it, for fun." The threat dripped with jealousy, fueled by Emily's flirting with Brandon. I smiled into the empty car and ended the call, knowing the ticket was worthless paper. Still, the betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected, especially Emily's quick betrayal and Pamela's sharp judgment. As Albuquerque's city lights shimmered past, I realized this was only the beginning. Their actions had solidified my resolve to push the test further, peeling back layers of deceit I hadn't fully imagined. The next morning, my phone was a battlefield. 30 missed calls, most from Danielle, some from Mark, even one from Aunt Karen, all before 7 a.m. voicemails piled up. Danielle's frantic voice, "Lindsay, where's the ticket? Did you find it?" Mark's smug tone, "Call me back. We need to talk about that million." I ignored them, sipping coffee in my quiet Albuquerque apartment, my resolve sharpening. The fake ticket had already unveiled their greed. To press further, I crafted the next phase. The ticket was stolen, leaving me desperate for $4,000 to cover rent and medical bills after a supposed health scare. I sent messages to the family, my words trembling with staged panic, and waited to see who'd step forward. First, I dialed Dad. He answered on the second ring, already in lecture mode. "Lindsay, I heard about the ticket mess from Karen. This is exactly why I've always told you to be careful with valuables." I explained the theft, weaving in my need for $4,000 and hinting at hospital tests for chest pains. He sighed, retreating into his engineer's logic. "You should have had a safety net. I warned you about living paycheck to paycheck." Then, unprompted, he slipped. "Your grandma's inheritance was supposed to be that safety net, but it got complicated." My pulse spiked. Brian Kelly had already helped me comb through old records after Brandon's attic hint, proving Dad had hidden Grandma's $20,000 gift for his own ventures. "Dad, what do you mean complicated?" I pressed, my voice sharp. He stuttered. "It was for family investments, Lindsay, not personal use." But his defensive tone betrayed him. The call ended with a hollow promise to think about helping, though no offer came. Next came Mom. She picked up sounding distracted, mid-conversation with Roger. "Oh, Lindsay, Danielle told me about the ticket fiasco. That's terrible." I gave her the same story, but she cut in quickly. "Have you asked your dad? Roger and I just poured money into the boutique's expansion." When I brought up the inheritance, her tone went sharp. "What exactly are you suggesting? That was settled years ago." But the quick denial and trembling pitch gave her away. She knew about Dad's ploy and shielded him. She promised to check with Roger, but suggested I try Thomas instead, passing the buck as always. Thomas was predictable. I texted him the story, and he answered instantly, "Sis, that's rough. I'll see what I can do." But days passed without another word, his signature ghosting move after empty vows, just like the $3,000 I'd lent him last year. My voicemails piled up unanswered. Aunt Karen was worse. Her call was pure scolding. "Lindsay, Emily told me you were careless with that ticket. I've always said teaching isn't secure." When I asked for help, she sneered. "You should have taken that corporate job like I told you." Later, I found a text from Emily to Aunt Karen during the party spelling out my win and mocking my panic. She'd played the dutiful cousin while feeding Karen ammo to shame me. Danielle and Mark stood together in refusal. Mark texted, "We can't help. Kids' school fees are draining us." Danielle called later, voice syrupy with false sympathy. "Lindsay, I'm so sorry about the ticket. Maybe it'll show up. We're stretched thin with the new house." Their rejection burned, especially after Mark's threat to toss the fake ticket and Danielle's grab and run at the party. Pamela and Roger were blunt in their group text reply. Sorry, Lindsay. We don't have extra cash for your mistakes. Maybe downsize that apartment. Their dismissal echoed Pamela's snide party digs, and Roger's mistakes felt like a jab at my entire life. As the week went on, I jotted their replies in a notebook. Each one a new wound. Brian, who kept texting to check in, offered to dig deeper into Dad's finances, confirming the inheritance had been funneled into a doomed business venture with Pamela's input. The family's excuses, deflections, and bald-faced lies stacked higher by the day. But the sharpest blow was Emily's betrayal. Her messages showed she'd orchestrated the gossip to cozy up to Aunt Karen. As I stared at my phone, notifications buzzing from Danielle's frantic follow-ups about the lost ticket, I realized the next call would either break me or show me who my family truly was. By the week's end, the sting of their responses, or absence, had drained me, my notebook heavy with their excuses and betrayals. I was about to dial Aunt Diane Moore, the only person I hadn't reached out to yet, when her name lit up my phone. Lindsay, sweetheart, I just heard from Susan about your trouble with that ticket, she said, her voice warm with concern despite her own hardships. Aunt Diane, a retired librarian living on a shoestring pension in a tiny Albuquerque condo, had battled heart issues for years. Yet she was the first to reach out unprompted. Are you all right? Do you need anything? Her concern, so real, cracked something in me. I met her the next day at a quiet diner near her place, a spot with worn booths and the smell of fresh coffee. She looked tired, gray hair pulled back, a plain sweater under a mismatched scarf, but her smile glowed as she hugged me tight. Over pancakes, I poured out the fake story about the stolen ticket and needing $4,000 for rent and medical bills. Without hesitation, she opened her purse and slid an envelope across the table. This is $2,500, she said softly. It's most of what I've saved, but it should help with rent. Don't worry about paying it back until you're steady. I stared at the envelope, stunned she was scraping by on meds, her budget stretched thin, yet she gave without pause. The weight of her kindness hit like a wave, and I couldn't keep the lie any longer. Aunt Diane, I need to tell you the truth, I said, my voice trembling. I didn't lose a ticket. I won $50 million in the lottery last week. The $1 million ticket was fake, a test to see who'd be there for me. Her eyes widened, but she stayed silent, letting me continue. I've been burned so many times by family, I had to know who cared. You're the only one who did, without even knowing the stakes. Tears welled as I told her about the party, Danielle's theft, Mark's threat, Emily's gossip to Aunt Karen, and the others' cold refusals. Then Aunt Diane leaned in, her face serious. Lindsay, there's something you should know about your family. She drew a slow breath. Your grandma left an inheritance, $20,000, meant for you and your siblings. James funneled it into a business venture with Pamela, claiming it was for the family's good. Susan knew but stayed quiet to avoid friction with Roger. I tried to object, but they pushed me out. Her words confirmed what Brian's digging and Brandon's attic discovery had already suggested, and the betrayal cut sharper, knowing it was intentional. I never told you because I didn't want to rip the family apart, she whispered, squeezing my hand. But you deserved the truth. I held her tight, tears streaming, overwhelmed by her selflessness and the clarity her confession gave me. I'm going to take care of you, I said. Your medical bills, a better home, whatever you need. She shook her head softly, but I insisted, already envisioning a small, accessible house near mine and a fund for her treatments. As we left the diner, her arm linked through mine, I felt a resolve harden. The family's lies, Danielle's greed, Emily's betrayal, James and Susan's cover-up had revealed their true faces. Aunt Diane was my real family, and I'd cut the rest out for good. No looking back. The weight of that choice felt heavy, but right, like setting down a burden I'd carried too long. 1 year after that defining week, my world in Albuquerque was unrecognizable. I had moved into a modest yet warm home in a quiet suburb, with a small garden where I sipped coffee each morning. no longer fearing my bank balance. The $50 million secured in a blind trust overseen by David Cole gave me freedom I'd never tasted. But it was Aunt Diane's honesty that reshaped everything. I blocked every family member who had failed my test. Danielle, Mark, Thomas, James, Susan, Aunt Karen, Emily, Pamela, Roger. No calls, no texts, no exceptions. When Thomas pitched a new business needing $5,000, or Danielle complained about private school tuition, I never replied. Their silence when I needed them echoed louder than their sudden pleas. With David's help, I set up a trust for Aunt Diane, covering her treatments and buying her a one-story home nearby, with wide doorways for her heart-related mobility issues. Her health improved, her smile brighter as she tended a small herb garden. "You didn't have to do this, Lindsay," she'd remind me during our weekly dinners. But I knew she deserved every ounce of it, inspired by her. I launched a nonprofit supporting low-income teachers and isolated seniors, offering grants for bills and home repairs. Christina stepped in as program coordinator, her nursing background perfect for outreach, while Brian Kelly volunteered, his crush having long faded into friendship. Brandon Chen, who'd tipped me off about the family documents, handled the nonprofit's real estate needs, his knowledge proving invaluable. Even John Adams, the corner store owner, pitched in, sharing stories of his own family's hardships to guide our mission. The nonprofit grew quickly, helping over 150 people in its first year. Teachers like me, once trapped paycheck to paycheck, and seniors like Aunt Diane, forgotten by their own blood. We'd sit on my porch, Christina, Aunt Diane, and I, planning fundraisers over wine, laughing in a way I'd never done with my so-called family. The work filled a void I hadn't realized was hollow, replacing the endless anxiety of chasing approval from those who never valued me. My old life, stretching groceries, dodging family demands, felt like a shadow. Cutting ties wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The truth about the inheritance, James draining Grandma's $20,000 into his doomed projects with Pamela, Susan's silence to keep peace with Roger, had crushed any final hope. Danielle's theft of the fake ticket, Mark's greedy threat, Emily's betrayal through text to Aunt Karen, and the family's cold rejection of my plea for $4,000 showed where I ranked. They didn't deserve a place in my future, and I refused to play along with half-baked apologies or empty concern. When James wrecked his car and needed repair money, I stayed silent. When Danielle texted about a family reunion, I ignored it. My peace mattered more than their approval. Looking back, the money didn't change me. It unmasked them. It showed me that family isn't blood. It's the people who show up without expecting payment. Aunt Diane, with her $2,500 sacrifice and her painful truth about the inheritance, gave me more than millions could. She proved love doesn't keep score. I learned to walk away from toxic bonds, to build life on my terms, and to pour my energy into helping others overlooked. If you're listening, ask yourself, who stands by you when you have nothing to offer? Those are your true people. Don't waste your strength on those who only see you as a payday. Thank you for hearing my story. If it resonated, please like, subscribe, and share your own experiences with loyalty tests or family betrayals in the comments. I'd love to know how you found your real circle.